Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to invite everyone to please...
I was very weak. I think I'm going to stand up and talk to a group that has one guy say good morning. Try it again.
Good morning.
What a
This
great-
reminds me of my Catholic grade school upbringing. Good morning, Father.
We all stood up when you walked in the room.
There you go. For those of you whom I've not yet had a chance to meet, I'm Jim Voice. I'm newly appointed the rector of the Jesuit community here at Gonzaga, but for the past year and a half I've also been working in the Office of Mission, and particularly working with staff and faculty to find ways that we can support you in carrying out the mission, because you, of course, are the ones who really have to live it. We all have to live it together, but you're the ones who are really on the front lines in so many ways. And this gathering today has really sort of emerged from conversations that I've had with many of you over the course of this past year and a half. What I'd like to do is just tell you a little bit about how this session or these days evolved, how this developed, because I've heard a number of people asking questions, like, well, why hospitality and what does that mean? And how did my name get on the list? And those kinds of things. People a little bit concerned at people saying I'm not hospitable. And that, of course, is not what's going on here. But before I get to that, I do want to acknowledge with great gratitude that this 3-day session has been very strongly supported by each of your deans and by the faculty assembly. Not only by means of encouragement and interest in the topic, but also, even more importantly in some ways, financially. So as we all know, with money being tight, that kind of support for anything is a real commitment. And it suggests that we've touched on something here that's of importance across the scale, across the scope of the university. The origin of these days, as I indicated, it really began with conversations that I had with faculty and staff over the course of a year and a half, talking about experiences that were not always pleasant. Experiences of sometimes feeling like outsiders, sometimes feeling treated disrespectfully, sometimes feeling like the environment was not welcoming, and therefore making it difficult for people to feel at home and productive and to feel able to flourish on the Gonzaga campus in the various kinds of works that you all do. Those kinds of comments and concerns have been emerging in conversations for some time. And then last January, Thane spoke to the faculty at the beginning of the semester and raised the issue of hospitality as sort of a general rubric for talking about a whole variety of issues about how we treat one another on campus. So hospitality can be conceived as, I'm the host and you're my guest, and we've got this huge power differential kind of thing going on here. That is exactly what we are not trying to talk about, or at least that's not the main focus, although there are power issues involved. Really what we're concerned about is the fact that we all have the power to be hospitable or inhospitable to one another, and that the way that we treat one another, whether or not we open up spaces within which people can feel welcome to flourish and thrive as who they are on this campus, are there ways that we can do that better? Are there ways that we can do that better? That's really the question that I began to kind of toss around in my mind on the basis of these many conversations and Thane's comments. Then, as it happens, in February, I was invited to give a presentation at Marquette University. They were having their annual mission week, and the theme was forgiveness. And as some of you know, I'm nearing completion of a book on forgiveness, and so I was invited to speak there, as was Rabbi Abie. And so we had a chance to chat, and he'd never been to the Northwest, and I said, well, we've got to figure out some way to get you out here. Much of Abie's experience over the years has involved building bridges, particularly in interreligious dialogue, interfaith dialogue. And so I was originally thinking, okay, let's do something on interreligious dialogue. But then, little by little, as I began thinking about this, I realized, wait a minute, underneath the dynamics of interreligious dialogue is something that really speaks to the issues that have been emerging, in my experience, on the campus over the course of the last year and a half, and that intersects with Thane's concerns about hospitality, civility on campus, and how we can really be at a greater level of depth what we present to the rest of the world that we are, which in many ways we are, a very hospitable, welcoming community. But how can we do that better and with one another? So little by little, in conversations with Abie, we began to, and with the deans and with various faculty, things began to take shape. And a number of people gathered together with me to sort of sound out what are some of the issues that you might like to explore if we were to get Abie on campus to be a resource and a catalyst for some of our own conversation with one another. How might we do that? And so that's how this 3-day series of conversations really began to develop. One of the things that was fairly clear early on in approaching the topic of hospitality on an academic campus is that for those of us who are involved in scholarship and research, it's very easy to jump to parsing definitions and what does hospitality mean and what kind of a definition are we going to work from. And that's one of the things that we really want to avoid in these days, imposing a definition that excludes other people's experience. Instead, the approach is going to be to invite people to talk about when they have experienced themselves as at home or welcomed, or when they have experienced themselves, when we have experienced ourselves as marginalized or excluded. So to talk from your experience, each individually, your operative definition, without having to come to some sort of definitional agreement, in order to draw experience to the forefront, so that we can really be connecting with one another about what we experience as real, and to draw from that themes, concerns, issues that we can look at and see if we can't find ways of addressing in our conduct and in our relations with one another in the year and the years ahead. So this is really trying to draw on your experience of what you would hope hospitality would be at Gonzaga University, and see if we can't move that forward, make that a reality at an ever deeper level. Of course, what I'm asking for, what we're hoping for in these days, really does involve taking some kinds of risks. Whenever we talk about ourselves, whenever we share things that are important to us, we are in fact making ourselves vulnerable. And therefore I think it's important, as I said in the initial invitation letter, that these times of conversation be treated with confidentiality. In organizing for the later sessions, when we're going to be talking about sensitive issues, and will be broken into small groups, we've attempted to arrange those groups so that you will not be in a small group conversation with anyone who has any kind of line of authority over you, so that you can feel the freedom to talk about your own experience. Any reporting that comes out of those small group conversations will be done in ways that comments or themes or ideas are not traceable to any particular individual. So it's important for you to know that on our part we're doing everything we can to respect confidentiality in the way that this is being conducted, but also that we're inviting all of the participants to really commit yourselves to respecting confidentiality with respect to those who are in your small groups. It's important that we be able to talk with one another and talk honestly and truthfully and realistically about what our experience has been, so that we can learn from what has not worked well and from what has, and so that we can emphasize the good and sketch a vision for what a better future might look like. So that's kind of the background to how this has all emerged and the way that we're trying to approach these next few days of conversation. Are there any questions before I turn to introducing our facilitator? Questions or concerns? Comments? Okay. Our conversations over these next few days are going to take us into a lot of different places, but I thought for the purpose of helping us to engage with one another, it would be good to bring in someone who has a different range of experience and a very broad range of experience, who can help us to explore the issues from different perspectives and can get us in conversation with one another. And very happily, I've had now two experiences of Rabbi Abie Ingber. The first was a little over a year ago when I went to the AJCU Leadership Conference in Chicago, and Abie was part of a guest panel speaking on interreligious dialogue and his own work as a rabbi who is the director of a Center for Interfaith Community Engagement on a Catholic Jesuit campus, Xavier University in Cincinnati. And he spoke very eloquently and was very, very impressive. I didn't really have a chance to meet him until the following February at that conference at Marquette. And then we began talking about possibilities of bringing him out here to the campus. I will therefore turn over the rest of this morning's, this session's conversation to Rabbi Abie Ingber. Please welcome him, and let's hear what he has to say.
Just see if we can handle this without a mic. Are you okay?
Yep.
We're good? Okay. So it makes my life easier when you're born to Jewish parents before you learn a real native language, you learn how to talk with your hands. So our conversation will be much better if I get to do this. Some of you may be from other beautiful ethnic communities where you speak the same language, and it's great. Well, let's just figure that out. I think my daughters at some point probably thought, wow, this is great, our father speaks American Sign. I want to begin very briefly with just a little bit of a personal introduction into not so much who I am, but why I am. We then will take some opportunity for questions here, break for coffee, bathroom, whatever you need, and my suggestion is have the coffee first. And then we'll come back here and we'll do a little bit of hands-on stuff with a few more comments that are more focused. But Jim's introduction of the thesis is really exceptional. I'm so thankful to be here, to have begun to meet some of you, and to know that when I leave, that charge of trying to make some meaning of what we do together for the next 3 days is, I think, in not just good and capable hands, but I think really is in beautiful hands. And I wouldn't be here were it not for that connection that has begun between us. So thank you. We are all born before we are born. This understanding allows parents, grandparents, and other significant elders in any family to really have a part in a child's birth and in his or her formation. So, even though I was born in 1950, I feel that I was birthed in the events that are called the Holocaust. Every story that my parents shared came to be a part of my story. Of course, I didn't know it in the first moments of life, but it didn't take very long until I figured that out. I was raised in an immigrant home in Montreal, Canada. We were very very poor. I may have missed out on some comforts, but I was not devoid of my parents' commitment to education, my parents' commitment to faith, or my parents' commitment to love and embracement of the world community. I have had a charmed life. Among the great teachers in my life was Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach of blessed memory. He once famously said, "If I had two hearts, like I have two legs and two arms, I could choose to use one to love and one to hate. But God only gave me one heart, and I choose to use it for love." My parents, with everything that they had seen, with the tragedies in their lives, with their independent journeys through the dark lands of the Holocaust, chose to use their lives for love. My parents met in a displaced persons camp in Germany, decided to marry, and in the greatest testament of faith in God, they chose to bring children into this world. Two Jews who had seen and experienced what they had experienced stood up and said, "God, if you don't mind, we'd like to bring Jewish children into this world." This testament to faith in God was also their own prayer that humanity might yet continue and find its grace and its compassion to treat their children well. I doubled my parents' production. I brought 4 children, 4 daughters, into this world. If I wanted my 4 daughters to be in a place that was safe, but that at the same time challenged them to live life with their eyes wide open, then I had to live my life the same way. I've pursued a life where I felt that I could be a teacher to my daughters, just as my parents had been to me. An adage by which I try to live is the purpose of life is a life of purpose. If the rest of the world, so to speak, wanted to look on as I was teaching my daughters, while I lived this life of purpose, I was amenable to that. My life has been defined by service to 3 universities: the University of Cincinnati, Hebrew Union College, and Xavier University. The latter has been my home since 2008, and it's the most cherished as I pursue an initiative to bring people from tolerance to celebration. How a rabbi winds up in service to a Jesuit Catholic college is worthy of a little explanation. Catholics and Ingbers have been interrelated for centuries. My father, when asked about the experience of being a Jew in a little Polish shtetl, a little small village, where the majority of the population was Catholic, said, and I quote, "At the best of times, it was intolerable." And yet, my grandfather, whom I never knew, had a unique relationship with the Catholic priest who served the church on the other side of the street from where my father was born. My grandfather and the Catholic priest would talk about the Bible across the stone wall of the church courtyard. Because of that, my grandmother, whom I also never knew, was allowed to go into the church courtyard and to use their well instead of having to go into the center of town to use the community's well. So, while at the best of times it was intolerable, the Ingber's somehow found a relationship with those who were religious leaders, people of faith within the church. My mother's own story is harrowing. She was literally the last survivor of a ghetto in a city on the border between Poland and Ukraine, a city called, ironically, Luck. For the next 3 days after she escaped from the ghetto in Luck, the 17,500 Jews who remained were taken out of town and machine-gunned to death. My mother was the last survivor of the ghetto of a town called Luck. She was left naked and with no human being to accompany her to save her life. But 6 righteous Christians, one after another, appeared miraculously in her life to save it. My mother did not need 1 Oskar Schindler, she needed 6. I was raised in Catholic, French-speaking Montreal. The anti-Semitism was palpable. Just as my father and grandfather and great-grandfather were chased through the streets and called Christ killers and dirty Jews, I had been chased through the streets and called a dirty Jew. That's what life is, I reasoned. That's what it's like to be a young Jew in the midst of Christians. But I also had these other stories of my grandfather discussing biblical texts, of my mother's life being saved by righteous Christians, and the experience of colleagues on every campus who've embraced me and my Judaism. I knew psychologically that I was eager for the presence of a righteous Christian in my own life. I knew somehow that I would never feel secure until I was satisfied that someone would open their door in the middle of the night for me and my 4 daughters and give us shelter. I found that first righteous Christian in the Methodist campus minister at the University of Cincinnati. I even told Reverend C. David Masika that. He didn't quite understand what I was mumbling, but I finally, through tears, broke through to him and his wife, Gail. But that night, as I lay in bed ready for peacefulness in my sleep, I began to wonder who in the Cincinnati community knew that they could knock on my door and that I would give them shelter among my 4 daughters. It was in that moment that I recognized the gentle hand of God and my most significant calling. I defined that calling by my devotion to the value of healing the world that was the legacy given to me by my parents. At the end of the 20th century, each of our institutions, academic, civic, commercial, philanthropic, aspired to the same goal. In a world of increasing awareness of diversity, we aspired to tolerance. That was it. Tolerance. We wanted to tolerate the other. Tolerate another human being. We needed to celebrate another human being. Only when we can reach to the point of celebrating the other will dialogue and bridge building work. The road to merely tolerance is a road to failure. My work in bridge building across faith traditions, cultures, geography affirms my own foundational belief that every person is a child of God, created in God's image. Whether it has been to Darfur refugee camps or with Muslims in Cameroon, whether on American Jesuit campuses or in the West Bank and Israel, I have not only brought back stories, I have been emboldened in my own story to find hope across the generations, to find God in every human being, to feel the holiness in each person, our shared human mission. In a sense, then, we can all aspire to be bridge builders. Some of you here this morning might even merit to become master bridge builders, building bridges through history, building bridges with every culture on the face of the earth, and bridges between heaven and earth. We live in a critical time. We call it the present. We're trapped between the past and the future. Whatever we do is shaped by what we have done in the past, shaped by what we've experienced and learned from the past. And whatever we do has an impact on the future, on our own children, on the young adults who cross the Gonzaga threshold and in our Spokane community. My feet emotionally took their first steps in the Polish homes of my parents. They have been solidly anchored in the past. My arms enfolding my own daughters and those young students who have become like family have been outstretched to embrace the present. But my eyes, with the benefit of every teacher and visionary who has taught me, have been boldly looking to a vision of the future. My God, the God of my parents, the God of your parents, has been very generous. Thank you. Let's go. Questions, thoughts, comments? They're not alive. Next. If we have to, we'll take, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You see bridging that gap between the Muslim world and the Christian world. I started to do some programming, trying to help these sides understand each other. And just, with your last line, we talk about the God of my parents and the God of your parents. Well, we all know that the God of Islam is the God of Abraham as well. So, what do you see as one of the main obstacles?
I have a, listen, I thought you'd ask me a tough question like peace in the Middle East, so this is... I have a pillow in my office. I have a lot of, technically it's called shit. I have a lot of stuff in my office. And my students love it because they're forever coming in to see what's new. And I trick them because I constantly rotate stuff in my office. So, if I'm seeing, let's say faculty members that their ethnic background is from Argentina, all of a sudden the next time they're in, there'll be something, about Rabbi Skorka, visible in my office. Saudi students, etc. But I have a pillow in my office that on one side has symbols and the prophets of major religions around the world. Great, welcoming. I can show you lots of bling that's welcoming. the other side of that pillow said, God is too big to fit into one religion. I think that the starting point for us, and clearly within the Catholic Church there was a wonderful conversation, common word that began between the Muslim community and the church. And that conversation just needs to be written large on the community that is coming within your midst. What does that mean in a real way? Have any of you ever said, why didn't we do that 30 years ago? Why didn't we do that 20 years ago? How stupid can you be? Why didn't we build that railroad crossing barrier? Why didn't we have hybrid cars? Why didn't we do X, Y, and Z? Why didn't we include women in this, that, or the other? Why didn't we have a room be handicap accessible 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago? Is that what they're going to say about you? Why didn't you do that in 2014? Why didn't you do that in 2014? The beauty of working in the academic environment is that we put all this amazing energy in, and God is generous. We never see the result of our labors. And I say God is generous because, boy, some of my labors in the 70s and 80s, I don't know if I want to see the benefit of that. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I walk into a doctor's office and it's one of my former students, it's like, okay, I'm finding another doctor because I remember what you were doing on Thursday nights. I mean, seriously. I mean, do I want a drunk college student taking something out of me? It's not happening. So I think that's where we have to go. This welcome of that which comes to be called the other. But the other, I'll reference this in other conversations, but the other is, you're the other. You're the other to me in this room, not because I'm from Cincinnati or Xavier and you're from Gonzaga. Not because I happen to be Jewish and maybe nobody else in this room is Jewish. Not because I have 4 daughters and maybe you don't have 4 daughters. By definition, everybody other than you is the other. So does it really make any difference if that other has gray hair, that other has a tie, that other has X chromosomes, that other has darker skin? If everybody's the other. My daughters are the other to me. They have my genetic material. And they're the other to me. And they're the other to each other. Started at Xavier. First thing I asked was, where do Muslim students pray? Wonderful answer. You ready for it? Wherever they want. Great. I don't know if there's any Catholics in this room. I'm going to ask you, where do you pray? And if your answer was, wherever I want, I'd say, what the hell are you doing? You don't have a chapel? You don't have a parish somehow, proximate to this university? Wherever they want is nothing. It's not an answer. I said, look, I mean, if I'm going to do interfaith community engagement with Catholics, with everybody, with different cultures, etc., first thing I need to know is that if somebody says to me, where can I pray? I have an answer for them. I said, oh, Rabbi, we've been looking at this for 2 years. We can't find a place. Give me a break. Give me the list. No, seriously. Give me the list. Whatever list you have of potential places, I'll walk this campus. Oh, no, it's not that easy. Just give me the list. So in 2 months, I'd walk to every one of those places. We found chapel in one of the residence halls. Technically, the Jesuit living in that residence hall used that as his chapel. Forgive me. Give me a break. There's not enough places for this one Jesuit, and I'd hate to think how often he had actually gone into that chapel to pray. And we politicked it. And, I mean, we didn't even have to move anything out of it. Every room has a crucifix at Xavier, so it was just not a big deal. We didn't have to de-sanctify anything. And I went out and bought a $1,000 Egyptian rug. Physical plant built a magnificent tiled washing station. And we announced that it was an interfaith chapel. It could not be booked by anybody on campus unless they were doing a religious service in it. I've never had a Jewish religious service in that room. I don't need it. I mean, really, I don't need it. I use Bellarmine Chapel. I mean, I don't need that room, but I know my Muslim students do. And when Ramadan came, I went to the handful of Muslim students on campus and I said, I want to host a Ramadan break the fast dinner. They didn't say, this is a little weird, a rabbi in a Catholic university wants to host a Ramadan, because they knew me. And if I said I wanted to host a Ramadan break the fast dinner, the guy who put $1,000 Egyptian rug and built a prayer room for us probably wants to host a Ramadan break the fast dinner. That's the key. The genuineness of the conversation. And at our first Ramadan break the fast dinner, 25, 30 Muslim students came, and 120 non-Muslim students came because they trusted me that if I was hosting it, it would be okay. And on table tents on each of the tables in our kind of food court area, one side of the table tent was about the pillar of fasting during Ramadan and what a Muslim fast was. The other side of the table tent talked about fasting in Catholic tradition. Did you know there was fasting? I mean, really, talked about fasting in Catholic tradition. Talked about fasting in Jewish tradition. Talked about fasting in Hindu tradition. And to signal the end of the fast day, I blew a 4-foot shofar, ram's horn. One of the Saudi students' fathers was there. He was so blown away, and when he asked me if I knew what dates were, I said Tamar, and he goes, oh, you know the Arabic word? I said, not only do I know the Arabic word, my third daughter is named Tamar for date palm. He sent me a box of dates marked for the exclusive presentation of the royal family of Saudi Arabia. So you want to know how to make it work? Make it work for you. Make it work, and this will be a theme I think that we'll share over and over again in these next 3 days, perhaps, and beyond. Encountering the other. Figuring out a dialogue with an honesty and openness to the Muslim community from you as a Catholic or whatever it happens to be, literally will give you an opportunity to talk about Catholicism without feeling like, oh, I don't know if we should talk about Catholicism. The best way for Gonzaga to become genuine in its Catholic expression, says the rabbi, is give everybody else a chance to be genuine, and you're going to go, shouldn't we be teaching our students this? And you will find that embrace works. And that same thing is true for everything we do in our lives. You want to love somebody? I mean, really, you want to love somebody? Try doing it before you can love yourself. It's never going to work. It's never going to work. You want to heal somebody? Great. But you really have to heal yourself first. None of this works unless your feet are solidly in the ground. So it didn't matter what you were going to ask. I was going to say that anyway. I'm kidding. I hope that's a little helpful. Yeah.
So what about Middle East peace? No, and actually, my question is, you don't have to necessarily go down that path, but maybe we could start by talking about the same kind of hospitality you were just describing for Dan in situations that have tremendous enmity or history where you have wounded people. So I think at Gonzaga there's a history of people who are very wounded by a variety of things. And so when Jim mentioned civility, for example, among faculty, between faculty, among the community, how do you do what you were just describing, which I think is the way to go, when you're also having to barriers of long-standing hatred. So, and then you can work your way up to the Middle East.
Well, and I was even more of a bastard. I said, we're born before we're born. So before you got this job at Gonzaga, the person who was there was insulting to everybody, so you must be insulting to everybody, case closed. Right, I mean, it doesn't work. The Middle East actually is pretty easy. I was running to a presentation on campus, going down the stairwell, and one of my students sees me, one of the Muslim students, he's putting up some poster in the stairwell. He goes, Rabbi Abie, I got a quick question for you. I said, Muhammad, I called him Muhammad, I got to run to this presentation, but I'll be back an hour and 15 minutes or so. Come to office, we'll sit down. He goes, it's just a quick question. I said, okay, because I don't like to say no. Okay, let's do it. He goes, what about peace in the Middle East? You know, I said, that's it? And he said, no, seriously. I said, okay, quick question, right? So, quick answer. All right. Do you want a Palestinian state, and would you like to see Israel continue as a state in the Middle East? You go first. And he said, I'd like to see a Palestinian state, and I don't think Israel should exist. I said, okay, my turn. I'd like to see a Palestinian state, and I think Israel is going to exist and should exist. Here's our call. You want to talk about what we can do together for that first part? Or you want to argue about how we have different approaches on the second part? And he said, oh. I gotta go. So, I think that's the reality of it, is that somehow we should be able to catch, with the rarest of exceptions, everybody in a place where can we find that commonality to be of service somewhere? Can we figure out some way to set this history aside temporarily? We'll deal with number two if we're focused on number one. And number one is putting students first. I mean, if student first is not your vocabulary when you wake up in the morning, your time will not be as productive as it should be. Not just could be, but should be at this university. One of my daughters going to look at a university on the East Coast, inner city school, and we walked into the admissions reception area, and this receptionist in the sea of all these folks instantly turns to us and says, how can I help you? And I thought, well, that's a pretty fast welcome back. And then I saw this sign behind her desk that said, you're not interrupting me. I'm here to serve you. Now, can you imagine if students, as they moved around this campus, encountered people who embraced them with, you're not interrupting me. I have this job, and my job is to be of service to you. I mean, that's an incredible attitude. Now, the entrenched stuff, I got to do this here, I'm busy, we never did it this way, I don't like that. Look, if folks at my university want to say, well, this guy spent 3 decades at the University of Cincinnati, he's an old fart, forget it, all right? Are you kidding me? I mean, I can dance circles around most of my students in terms of that energy of the embrace of the other. The students cannot catch me without my willingness to be present in their lives. Am I tired at the end of the day? Boy, I'm tired at the end of the day. Did I get all my work done? I did not get all my work done. I never get all my work done. If anybody here gets all their work done, there was somebody here who's career services. I mean, talk to HR. There's something wrong with their job. You cannot get all your work done. So if you can't get all your work done, why spend time undoing somebody else's work or focusing in on this has divided us forever? I pick up the phone, send emails, book coffee meetings with folks who I think might have some baggage about what we're trying to do or the history of what we're doing. And we're in academic affairs. We're not in student life. In academic affairs, they have some thought about how could folks primarily serving students be in academic affairs. Now, you want to parse that one for me? How could people serving students actually be in academic affairs? Duh. That's where we should be. That's where we should be. Student life, as a separate division, is not ancillary to academic affairs. This is not, what do we do with students to keep them from getting drunk? I mean, what a mission statement for student life. Our mission is to keep students from getting drunk, or now having pot delivered to their dorm rooms. I mean, seriously, great mission statement. Good luck with that one. So I think if we reach out beyond that, now I prime my students. I mean, I don't want to be dismissive here at all of what you said. I prime my students. I will say this may be difficult. When you're going to ask this person to collaborate with us, they may have some baggage. I never say, here's the baggage that they have. You know what, let them figure it out. But I don't mind saying to them, there may be some baggage. Here's how I think you can disarm that. Now, after 6 tries, 26 tries, a person says, this is how I'm going through life. I'm sorry. You know what, I'm just sorry. I mean, I hope that this frozen attitude relaxes a little when you get home to your husband. It relaxes a little when you encounter your children. It relaxes a little when you see your friends for a beer. But I think that we can do this here, but no good work will be done when you say, here's my list of people I don't work with. That cannot happen in life. I mean, I could decide I'm not talking to my next door neighbor, really, because I don't want to talk to any of my next door neighbors. I mean, my friends go, wow, you have nice people around. I say, I don't know. And they go, hold on a second. Mister, you can talk to anybody, doesn't want to talk to your neighbors. When I finally get home at night, I don't want someone saying, wait a minute, you're a rabbi. Do you know so-and-so? I have a Jewish friend in Chicago. I mean, really? Give me a break. I mean, those of you who are carry the mantle of priesthood, and I think at this point I can still say, when you're standing at a urinal, and the person next to you says, oh, Father, I meant to call you, and you go, what about my urinating made you remember that you wanted to call me? But that's my life. That's my life. When I travel on airplanes and people want to jabber to me, they go, what do you do? I go, I'm an undertaker. And they go, really? So like, wow, that might be interesting, right? And then I say, it's a family business. So I come from a long line of people. Just Barry, we have no personality. Don't talk to me. I've got to get ready for Gonzaga. We should have some coffee, right? So let's run upstairs, have some coffee. I'll learn to answer shorter questions, but I'm having so much fun with you guys. So thanks.
Thank you.